Hello everyone. Today's class is on language and speech. So before going into specifically into the language and the speech part, let's summarize whatever we have done till now in the cortex area, right? Like we have studied about the functions of the frontal cortex, the frontal lobe part, the parietal cortex, the occipital cortex, as well as the temporal, right? So, putting all these things together, we can say, like we have read in every particular cortex, be it the frontal or the parietal or the temporal, we had some primary areas, then there were some secondary areas, right? And then there were some other association or the higher association areas, right? Association and higher association areas. So, the by and large, we can say the cerebral cortex, it is of two, it can be divided into two subdivisions, right? The motor part and the sensory part. Motor is further having the primary, secondary, and then association and higher association areas. Similarly, in the case of the sensory, we have primary, secondary association and higher association area for the sensory one, right? So, we have discussed till now regarding all these areas functions. So, by and large, we can say the primary area, the major primary and secondary sensory area, if we look at, say, the major primary sensory area, what does it do? The major primary sensory area does to recognize a particular sensation, any modality, like whether the visual modality we can see, or auditory we can hear, or if there is any somatic, we can feel the sensation, right? Like whether there is a touch or pain or any kind of the thing, right? So that is the function of primary sensory area. Now, what does the secondary area do? The secondary area, they make sense out of these different sensations, these visual or the auditory or the somatosensory, those signals, they are coming from the sensory receptor into the primary area. The secondary area will make sense out of these sensation. Primary area will just feel the sensation, like whether there is a visual, we are seeing the thing, we are hearing the thing, or we are feeling the touch or all those things. But the secondary sensory area will make the sense out of it, right? For example, we can say among the secondary area, there were like the supplementary area. It also falls under supplementary area, falls under the secondary part, right? Like say if there is for the sensory, similarly for the primary motor area, what does it do? It will make the muscle to move, right? Because there is motor homunculus, and if we study those neurons located in the motor cortex, exactly in the primary motor area, right? Primary motor area, then what will happen? We will see the movement of the skeletal muscle of the corresponding area, right? Now, what does the secondary motor do? Secondary motor area, among the secondary motor area, there will be the supplementary and the premotor area. The supplementary motor area plus the premotor area. The function of this secondary area is to provide the pattern. This secondary motor area provides the pattern of a particular movement that is to be executed with the help of the primary motor area, right? So if there is no secondary area, whether it is in the case of the sensory or in the case of the motor, these primary areas of both the sensory and the motor one will make no sense, right? So they are working in collaboration with each other, right? The primary area cannot function without the secondary, and secondary area will also not make any sense if there is absence of the primary area. Like say if we see, I said the secondary area, the secondary sensory area, it makes the sense out of the these different sensation. We can say like the interpretation, say let me say clear this thing, like the primary sensory area is making, say we are talking about the somatosensory, right? In the case of the somatosensory, just take the example of touch. So the primary sensory area will sense the touch, right? Like a particular area of the body is touched by a particular thing or not. Like say if you are holding a pen, it means the primary sensory area will function up to the point that there is touch by anything. Like say it doesn't interpret what is that thing, or interpretation of the shape or texture of that pen in your hand, that is done with the help of the secondary sensory area, right? Specifics, or we can say the meaning of the specific sensory signal. Or when, if we take the example of visual, like primary sensory area for the visual, primary visual area, it will make the sense like there is something we are seeing. Like if you are looking at a book or a notebook or the pen or the table, you are just looking at the thing, but the interpretation of the color, what kind of the color is there, how much intense light is there, is it light in the light shade or in the darker, or direction of the light, of those light intensity, direction, as well as like in the case of the auditory, we can say the meaning of the sound. If you are hearing something, that is the function of primary auditory cortex, right? Now the secondary, the auditory cortex, that will help in making the sense out of that sound, meaning of the sound, right? Source of the sound, like is it coming from a nearby source or a far away source, direction of the sound. Okay, so all these functions are done with the help of the secondary areas. Now there is primary, there is secondary, then there is one more thing that is called as association areas. And this association area, it appears like this is the tertiary one, right? Like there is a primary, there is a secondary, then there are the association or the higher association areas. It means they should fall under the tertiary. No, they have got very large significance, though they might come under the third level, third category, but they are very, very important. And they are not exclusively, like say the primary somatosensory area or the secondary somatosensory area, or we can say the primary motor area and the premotor area, they are located at a particular point, right? Say in the precentral gyrus, we can say this area is for the motor, this area is, and the nearby area, this one is for premotor, right? Premotor and all. And similarly, we can say this particular area is primary sensory, and the nearby, this area was for the secondary somatosensory area. But the remaining part, the association areas, they don't have any defined area. You cannot say like this is for the auditory association area or this is for the visual. They are actually in a way widely spread, right? Widely spread out. And these association areas, first of all, why they are called as association? As the name itself suggests, they associate the different sensory modality as well as the motor functions. They receive and analyze the signal, right? They receive and analyze the sensory signals, right, coming from different areas. Like say it might be coming from the sensory, this part, motor part, or the sensory one, different part of the cerebral hemisphere. And broadly we can divide, or we can study these association areas into three parts. One is parieto-occipito-temporal. Parieto-occipito-temporal. As the name itself suggests, it is located in the parietal, occipital as well as the temporal area. The second one is the prefrontal association areas. The prefrontal association area, right? And the third one is the limbic association areas. So actually we have discussed about all these things. The prefrontal association area we have covered up in the previous lectures. If you want to see, you can go through those lectures. And limbic association area, this one we will cover in the coming slides. Now this parieto-occipital temporal association area, today's topic, the speech and language, it is majorly concerned by this area, the parieto-occipital temporal area, right? Because this area lies in the large parietal, occipital as well as the temporal lobe, right? The temporal lobe. So if we look at the functions of the parieto-occipital temporal association area, first and foremost function of it was to analyze the spatial coordinates of the body, right? To analyze the spatial coordinates of body, like all the somatosensory, the area, or we can say it is receiving the sensory, all the somatosensory as well as the visual and auditory sensory information, they are coming and they are getting analyzed within this parieto-occipital temporal area. So spatial coordinates of the body means we make an image of the body, right? We make an image of the body in the space, right? In the environment, our presence of entire body, that is done with the help of this area. This one we have covered in the previous lectures, so we won't go into detail. The second one is it helps in language comprehension. Language comprehension, like whatever I am saying, just now I am speaking some of the things, right? And you are hearing it and understanding it, right? If you are understanding it, it means whatever I am uttering the words, this particular thing, or you can call it speech, you are comprehending the sentence as well as the meaning of the words with the help of the vernix area. Vernix area, the parieto-occipital temporal association area, the other name of it is also known as the vernix area, right? Vernix area. The third one is it is area for not only for the language, whatever you are listening, you are also looking at these words I am writing down, right? You are looking at this whiteboard. I have written the language, I have written the comprehension, I have written the body. It means you are seeing these words and it will go into your visual cortex, right, in the occipital lobe. Now you have seen these words, you know the meaning, you have interpreted, analyzed the meaning of these words with the help of primary and secondary visual areas. Now the meaning of these words is interpreted or comprehended within this vernix area, right? Within this vernix area. But if we look at the diagram, I will show in the next slide the diagram. The from the occipital cortex, say this is the diagram of lobe from the occipital cortex, and say this over here is the vernix area. This information will go to the vernix area. In between the pathway, in between this path, there is one particular area that is called as angular gyrus. This one also we have covered. This angular gyrus area. The angular gyrus area is the area of temporal lobe. It's actually, we can say, it is located at the posterior most part of the temporal gyrus, right? So angular gyrus is needed to make the meaning of visually perceived words. If it is absent, what will happen? This one we have covered in detail in the previous lectures. A person who is having a lesion in the angular gyrus, he was suffering from alexia, right? Alexia means the word blindness. That person is not able to comprehend the meaning because this pathway has been cut. It won't reach to the vernix area. Now the vernix area is normal, occipital lobe, visual cortex is normal, but angular gyrus is not normal. There is a lesion over here. So the angular gyrus area, this, when we say the parieto-occipito-temporal, we are including the angular gyrus along with the vernix area. That's why I said the third function of parieto-occipito-temporal association area is initial processing of the visual language. There will be the initial processing of the visual language in the angular gyrus, then the final processing or comprehension will happen in the anteriormost part, that is the vernix area. Right. Now the fourth function of this association area is area for naming the object. Naming the objects, whatever the objects are there, we are seeing that part is, that object is named with the help of this particular area. If we look at the anterior occipital lobe, say this is the diagram of the cerebral hemisphere, right? So in the anteriormost part of the occipital lobe, and anteriormost part, say this is the anteriormost part of the occipital lobe, and the posteriormost part of the temporal nearby, this will be the lower part, sorry, not upper, this lower part, and this is the anteriormost part of the occipital lobe. This particular area is concerned for naming the object. So this is the association. This doesn't have the boundary, like it's neither in the occipital nor exclusively in the temporal. This confluence, right, the merging point, this area is concerned. The names of if say the pen, okay, the pen or the pencil, or the, you are watching this video on your phone, all these names, the phone, they are learned mainly through the auditory input, right? First through the auditory input, whereas the physical nature of the object, that is through the visual input. So both the auditory as well as the visual input is necessary. Both the auditory and visual input, they are necessary to understand or to learn about the naming a particular object. So this one will happen in this particular parieto-occipito-temporal association area. The visual as well as the auditory input, they are essential for the comprehension that happens in this parieto-occipito-temporal association area, right? So now we can say the vernix area is a general, we can say it's a general interpretive area, because the general interpretation of any sensory modality that happens in this particular area, or we can say this vernix area is located in, where exactly the location? It is part in the confluence, the merging point of the parietal, the temporal and the occipital. Or if we say, see the vernix area, we are calling it has got so many other names too. It has got, the other name is general interpretative area, because it is helping in interpretation of any sensation modality. Or this one is also known as knowing area, because we know about anything with the help of this particular area. So knowing area, or as I said previously, this is also known as tertiary association area. Primary, secondary, after that the tertiary association area. Or there is one more name, that name is called as gnostic area. Because if there is deficiency, then happens agnosia. Like there is a visual agnosia, means that vision sensory modality is not functioning properly. Auditory agnosia, your auditory sensory modality is not functioning properly. That is known as agnosia. This is gnostic, knowing about those things. So gnostic, or the knowing, or the tertiary association, or the Wernicke's area, or the general interpretative area, all these terms are used for one particular area, right? This we can say the parieto-occipito-temporal association area. And mainly, not mainly, means we can say the exclusively, it is about the dominant cerebral hemisphere, and mainly in most or majority of the population, the left side is the dominant. So left sided, this particular area is known by these different names. So this area, we can say, this area is the one by which we can judge or we can calculate a particular person's intelligence, we can say, right? If you know about the things, whatever the sensory modality, like the visual or the auditory or the somatosensory, all these things, you are interpreting them and you are analyzing and understanding, comprehending the thing, and then expressing it with the collaboration of the other areas, then that is the measurement of your intelligence, right? Say if we read a book, say we are reading the book, or we are looking at the thing. Just imagine we are reading a book and memorizing that thing. We learn the thing and memorize it. How we store that memory? It's not stored as a printed image of a page of that book. It will be either stored in the form of the words, right? It will either stored in the form of the words or any thought conveyed. Whatever the thought has been conveyed, written at that book in a language form, right? In the language form. The sensory area of the dominant cerebral hemisphere, that will be the left cerebral hemisphere, for the interpretation of that language is Wernicke's area, right? This is the Wernicke's area. So the close relation of this Wernicke's area with the primary and secondary hearing area, as well as the primary and secondary visual area, right? Visual area. Say, let me open that thing. Say this is the diagram. In this diagram, if you look over here, this is the parieto-occipito-temporal association area, right? In the parieto-occipito-temporal association area. And in this one, say this was the temporal, this is the superior temporal gyrus. The posterior most part of the superior temporal gyrus exactly over this particular area. If we further subdivide this parieto-occipito-temporal association area, then we can say this is the area number 22. This angular gyrus is located over here, the area number 39, and deep inside there is supramarginal gyrus, that is the area number 40. So all these, like inclusively, all these areas, they will fall under this parieto-occipito-temporal association areas. And if we look at this diagram, say this one, now this parieto-occipito-temporal association area, this particular part is for naming of the object, right? This is regarding the vision. We are seeing the things, and these the secondary area, they are visual processing of the words and naming of the object, right? Naming of the object. Similarly, this is the auditory area, right? Auditory area, and this is the somatosensory area. Now, in the nearby auditory area, there is language comprehension and the intelligence, and this one is the spatial coordinates of the body and the surrounding. So all these areas, if we look over here, this is the somatosensory. So the somatosensory is coming, and the nearby part of the parieto-occipito-temporal association area is spatial coordinates of the body and surrounding, to make an image of the body in the environment or the space. Similarly, in nearby to the auditory, there is language comprehension area, and near the vision there is for the visual processing of the words. So we can say the exclusive sensory area, primary and secondary, they are located over here and over here, and they come from all the direction and they go to the parieto-occipitotemporal association area to get interpreted and analyze and comprehend the meaning of those sensory signals. So that is the function of this parieto-occipitotemporal association areas. Say in this diagram we can see all these inputs, either they are perceived through the visual modality or the auditory modality or the somatosensory modality. They are going in only one direction to get analyzed, interpret and understand the meaning of the things we are feeling, we are seeing or we are hearing, right? So that's regarding the parieto-occipital temporal association area. Now coming to the speech.